Does this undermine the cloud?
Well, there is so much positive momentum around cloud and so many benefits that I don't anticipate seeing a pendulum swing back to on-prem data centers. But what I do think it means is people are going to really give a hard look at cloud security.
Now, this was related to a flaw in a Capital One firewall, not an Amazon Web Services issue. That said, is Amazon Web Services vulnerable, which is the biggest player in the cloud market?
So as you stated, this really attack was a result of a vulnerability known as a configuration error in a web application firewall that was specific to Capital One. But what it does show is these configuration errors are actually really very commonplace. They're commonplace in on-prem data centers and in cloud. And in this case, you had someone with a pretty good level of sophistication who was leveraging that vulnerability.
Right, someone who used to work at Amazon Web Services. And so you wonder, should Amazon be training its customers better if they're going to use their cloud?
Well, I think this does highlight a few things. It does highlight insider threat, someone who had some insider knowledge. It also highlights, just supply chain level security. But at the end of the day, it also says when you have something at this scale, why not use some artificial intelligence or something that could have spotted this? Because actually, what was done was pretty blatant. It was 30 gigabytes of data moving to unusual storage locations, right? So there were a lot of ways that something like an AI system could have detected this, but also prevented it from becoming an issue.
And normally when this happens, it's a state actor, it's going on the dark web, we don't necessarily know who has done it immediately. That's what makes this case so unique. How common are these kinds of hacks as opposed to the other hacks that you're normally on the show talking about?
Yeah, I think that in many cases, this does show configuration errors are basically a human error. So somebody somewhere made a human error mistake, right? And I think that we have to expect that humans are fallible and we're going to see that type of errors. I think what's so strange about this one is how public the disclosure was by the attacker, on Twitter and GitHub and other places. So I think that was what made it so unusual, but it also meant that the investigation moved very quickly, and it seems like there's been quite a bit of transparency as well.
All right, so this situation aside, what are the trends you're seeing right now in terms of threats, in terms of attacks, given the ratcheting up of the trade war, and that foreign actors are often behind these attacks, even though not necessarily this one?
Well, I think it's interesting timing because we're actually going into Black Hat and DEF CON, which is often known as summer camp for hackers.
Right.
And
Two
so,
big cybersecurity conferences for those who don't know the lingo.
Exactly, and there'll be literally tens of thousands of people in Las Vegas next week. And I think that all of this is going to change the conversation. We're going to see a lot about cloud security, about 5G security. I think about encryption and decrypting data. And also, of course, the evolution towards AI-based attacks.
And as we approach another high-profile U.S. election, do you expect the threats to ratchet up? I mean, we just learned that the Russians managed to hack every single state's election system.
So I think what's interesting is there's people want to kind of say, well, let's make sure we prevent the kind of attacks we saw in 2016. The reality is the way the cybersecurity industry works, the attackers keep moving on. They keep changing what's called threat vectors. So I do think we'll see plenty of threats for 2020, but they may not look anything like the ones we saw in 2016.